The next question comes from Hayley Gow. Wave your hand, Hayley. Okay, let's just get a microphone to you.
Hi, so my question is, do you think that religion brings more evil than good to the world?
Okay, does religion bring more evil than good to the world? Okay, very interesting question. Let's start with, let's go in reverse order. Joe Greenaway, what do you have to say here?
So I think that the question can be put slightly differently in that, is it religious people or religion that might be bringing evil into the world? And to me, people might do things in the name of religion, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's the religion that's causing evil, that people use religion for political ends, people use religion to serve their own agendas. I think that religion can be a tremendous force for good, and that religious education, religious literacy is extremely, extremely important. Personally, in my work, I deal with very difficult cases of men refusing to give their wives a Jewish divorce, and it's an issue that I encounter daily, where which I find very troubling, that people are using an ostensibly religious framework in order to perpetuate abuse of wives and controlling other people. And so, to me, that's really an example of people where they have a religious obligation to give a get, but they're using a religious system where we can't force somebody to deal with a get to do a lot of damage. So that's why I feel like, personally, that we have to use strategies in order to make sure that is dealt with, and that religion can't be a force for bad.
Okay, so who in the audience thinks that religion actually, on the whole, brings more evil than good to the world? Okay, yeah, over there in the corner, do you want to make a comment? You agree? Why do you think? Do you think that religion brings any good to the world?
I feel like the guidelines of religion brings about the best way of living, but not necessarily taking everything that the books say so literally, rather than finding the meaning and the metaphor behind what the stories are saying.
And do you think the world would be better off without religion?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. Simon Johnson, what do you have to say?
I think that, listen, we're not in the Middle Ages anymore. We're not, we're not having the Crusades. And I think that what you have to accept is that the majority of religions have within their systems values that I think bring a lot of good to the world. I mean, if you talk about the Jewish religion and Jewish values, I've written a few down here that are important to us within our teachings: tolerance, respect, charity, family, honesty, respect for the rule of law. Those are the types of values that are consistent, particularly amongst the three main Abrahamic faiths: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In my view, in the modern world, the problem now is not with religion, it's with the manipulation of religion by those who have evil or extremist views, and that is where you get the problem. The vast majority of people of faith, or people who come from a faith background, will live according to values that are important, that are shared with the vast majority of people in this country. But the problems that we get are from those people who use religion and twist and manipulate the teachings for their own ideological or political
And how do you distinguish between religion and manipulation of religion? How can you know what's different or not?
I'm afraid when you see religious wars, when you see religious violence committed on any side, that, in my view, is a manipulation of violence. I don't think any modern Abrahamic religion allows you to murder another human being. And yet, even within the Jewish religion, there have been people who have murdered others, claiming that is the religious teaching. And I think that is where you get into the manipulation of religion.
Okay. In the grey sweatshirt, yeah.
So you said that people who do bad things in the name of religion are manipulating religion. Would you not accept that, in fact, maybe they are actually a more authentic interpretation of the holy books? Like, for example, in the Torah, we read a few weeks ago about the commandment to kill every single Amalekite. Would you not accept that maybe some of the values of religion that you have said are from religion, are maybe not from religion, but maybe modern interpretations, which is in fact a far less authentic view of that religion?
Rabbi Farhi? Yeah.
I have to say, and this is, again, whenever you're dealing with a situation like this, where each one of these questions could be a discussion for many days, you don't want to fall into the trap of doing the sound bites. You know, the bits that kind of will get cut out and taken out of context or whatever the case is. But I'll just, as an example, there's a law that says that a person who is from the Amalekite religion is allowed to do teshuvah. Those Amalekites are manipulating the microphones now. What's going on? I don't know if are we good? Okay. Yeah? Now, there's a law that states that a person the Amalekite that does teshuvah, that does not mean that he converts to Judaism. Even if he decides to kind of renounce this idea, because really what is Amalek? The Rambam writes that after, Maimonides writes this explicitly, that after the time of Sancherib, which was a king many thousands of years ago, he took all the populations of the world and mixed them up. Because one of the things that you have when you have people on their own lands is that they feel a strong sense of nationalism, they're very kind of rooted, and he wanted everyone to be part of his empire. He was a non-Jewish king, almost an emperor over many lands. So he moved people around. And Rambam still brings the laws about a certain specific people. And the commentators explain on this Rambam, this idea of Maimonides, that the idea of being an Amalekite is not a nation or a race, it's a state of mind. When a group of people are absolutely dedicated to wiping out the Jewish people, where they're teaching their children from the very, very young age this concept. So what you're dealing with here is a group of people who are dedicated to the destruction of the Jewish people. That's all that they live for, to the point that effectively the initial Amalekites were looked at as kamikaze fighters. There's also a Jewish law that says if someone rises up against you to kill you, you don't have to let them kill you in the name of religion, because you're allowed to fight back. If the person no longer falls under the category of being an Amalekite because they've renounced those views, then they don't fall into that category. So it's important when a person is understanding these laws, as you say, the authenticity of these laws, to actually study the framework and see what it does say in halakha and what it doesn't say, and then to really kind of operate on a guideline for that. But I'd like to add one last point before I hand off, and that is that the real question here is religion a greater force for evil than good in the world? And that's only a question that can be taken on balance. And the question you really need to ask yourself then is, when human beings are left to their own devices, when there isn't any impetus or mitzvah or something guiding you to move towards a place where you're commanded or obligated to do something, you wind up with people who in many ways are acting not in the way, they're not being selfless or whatever. And a very important talk would be to watch a TED talk called Atheism 2.0, which I absolutely found fascinating. Because you find someone grappling with this concept as an atheist of desiring or trying to figure out a way to have mitzvahs even though you don't believe in God. It's a fascinating thing. You should watch it and form your own opinion.
Okay, we've got a comment over here. The guy in the grey sweatshirt. Is that with him? And then we'll go to Laura. Yeah, guys, please be quiet for your friend.
Rabbi said that we have to take a question like this on balance, but surely this isn't just taking into account the sort of Judaism, it's taking into account all religions. So Christianity, Catholic Church, Islam. Surely you see the injustices that have been done over time and over history, and the things that are still being preached today by vicars, by priests, by imams, not by rabbis, because I don't know any radical rabbis, but you see
I can
these
introduce
things.
you to some.
You see these things being preached in today in the name of religion, no matter if they're manipulating it. Don't you think that because religion exists, these things exist? So therefore, by that reasoning, religion is a force for evil more than a force for good.
So Laura, you're very involved in interfaith work. What do you have to say about all this?
Well, I take quite a different perspective on this, actually. From Rabbi Fahy, for example, I'm very interested in an approach to religion which looks at the laws and then interprets them. You can interpret them in lots of ways, and I'm very interested in that sort of approach. But I want to take a completely different angle on it, which is, for me, my religion is not about what specific things that are written say necessarily. My religion, my Judaism, is based on lots of things. My Judaism is based on my upbringing, my history, my family, my culture, the food, the festivals. All of that contributes to what makes me a Jew. And it's much broader than an interpretation of the scriptures. So starting with what the young man here was talking about when it says this and therefore this. Yeah, okay, it might say this, and we can interpret it in lots of different ways, and Rabbi Fahy did that very well. But for me, I wouldn't get hung up on this, because actually, for me, being Jewish is something integral to me, and a combination of all sorts of other factors in my life, of which Scripture is only one small part.
Okay.
And therefore, does it bring more evil than good? I would say that if your interpretation of religion is as somebody in a modern world who takes religion as part of their essence, you can choose to see it in a positive way. You can choose to use it in a positive way.
In a personal way.
In a personal and positive way.
Okay, so Joe Greenaway, you're involved with the London Beth Din. Do you think that too much emphasis is placed on religious scriptures, like Laura's saying, and that's why religion provides harm in the world? What do you think?
So I think that we need to think about each of our own responsibility in relation to religion. So I don't think it's a question of, is it religion that's causing problems in the world? I think each of us has an obligation as a Jewish person to make the world a better place. And I think there are a couple of different aspects to that. So it's both using the religious scriptures and using our mitzvot in order to make us better people. I think, I'm privileged that I have a lot of amazing religious role models in my life, and I believe very strongly that the Torah and the mitzvot are there to make us better people. But it's not just about looking inwards at ourselves, it's also about social responsibility, looking at the outside world. Every person, not just Jewish people who live in Hendon, are created, but Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. That is very clear in the first chapter of our Torah. And so I think, it's a combination of those two things, the scriptures and the obligations within those, to be Or LaGoyim, to be a light unto the nations, and, for all of us to make the world better.
So I'd like to go to the audience again. I'd like to get some different opinions. But one of the things I'd like you to think about is Simon Johnson said earlier, he spoke about different values which religion brings, family values, the importance of education and the value of human life, these things. Do you think we would have these values in the world without religion? Just something to think about. But if anyone has any specific comments they want to make, just raise your hand as high as you can.
So the values and good parts and aspects of religion have been pointed out, and obviously we can't just rely upon scripture, but I think the point that was being made before was that without religion existing, religious institutions and their leaders and the atrocities that have been committed by them wouldn't have had a platform upon which those things could happen. So regardless of the good aspects, wouldn't you argue that the institution of religion is a key instrument to allow such things to happen?
Yeah. Okay, any other points? Yeah, over there, the guy in the grey sweater. Everyone's wearing grey sweaters today.
So, just in regards to the point that religion gives moral guidance and ways to live, I'd like to ask why it's so essential to have a book to tell you what to do. You don't see in secular countries massive rates of murder, just with no sort of moral guidance. Why do you need to be told how to act in a moral way? Can't you figure out with your own human intuition and compassion?
Okay, Eddie Aronson, can't we figure out morals with our own intuition? Why do we need a book to tell us what's right and wrong?
So I think that's a really important question, because this really gets down to the history of religion and what it's contributed. Because certain ideas that we take...
Ed, can you speak up a tiny bit?
Certain ideas that we take for granted weren't necessarily obvious so long ago. So, for example, treating other people, not from our tribe, but from another country, etc., as having equal dignity to us, did not always exist. The idea that in Judaism we say that all human beings are made in the image of God, that was a major driving force in, creating cultures that actually valued human beings more. We know that Christianity, according to many scholars, Christianity's impact and Christianity's, the values, a lot of them were based, of course, on Judaism, like the value of sacredness of human life and human dignity, were one of the main factors that led to the end of, say, gladiator fighting, etc., in the Roman Empire. So we can see the benefits that come with religion and some of the ideas contained in Scripture. Especially, we think of peace today as an ideal. Is that correct? I think most of us do. But actually, peace as an abstract ideal was created by the prophets. Usually, most ancient cultures valued war. So again, that's very counterintuitive. Didn't everyone just want peace? So I think we need to look more carefully at the history of ideas But I would also think there's a truth in your question, which is that yes, we have a moral sense, and we need to use that moral sense to interact with the scripture. So I think that's really important, and I think that our moral senses guides us and helps us make most of the decisions we make. But I just want to go back to an important question before,
quickly,
that about literalism. I think the young man here, you asked. I think you're right. We have to go and we have to really look very carefully to see what is the authentic voice of religion. It's not. I think we shouldn't just say it's all up for grabs. Every voice is equal. No, we need to really study carefully. And I think you're right. So we need to. That's a hard job. And lastly, to the original question, I think that today, we see one of the ugliest sides of religion. We see so many wars carried out in its name. But I also think there's an injustice just to leaving it at that. So I think of like the new atheists, like Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, the late Christopher Hitchens, who pushed a narrative that said that religion was the main source of violence and of war in the world, which is, I think, just a factual error. So if you look at Axelrod and Phillips in the Encyclopedia of Wars, they survey around 1,800 wars, and they find that only about 10% have anything whatsoever to do with religion. So if you're going to, I think it's just incorrect to say that religion is the major source of violence. And I would also say one last thing, which is that, just one last thing. I think it's important, sorry. It's just very important because there's a recent study carried out by Robert Putnam at Harvard University. He's a professor of public policy there. In his book, American Grace, and there are many studies like this. Again, before I say this, it's very important to say, of course, there are good religious people and bad religious people, and good secular people and bad secular people, and it's very hard to generalize, but the question forces us to. He points out there that in America at least, religious people are on average more likely to give to charity, to help a neighbor, etc. So that's a study done on average. So I think that, again, you can have irreligious people that are far better than non-religious people. I'm not saying, we mustn't generalize, but that's an important point. Sorry, thank you, Ollie.
It's a great point. Okay, so let's get a comment over there from that chap over there.
You're speaking a lot about the Jewish scripts. What about the other scripts that we don't really learn about, the other religions?
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Any other points? Okay. We just want to get a few more comments in before.
Get to it.
Go for it. Chap over there.
The gentleman who spoke over there just now, speaking about the new atheist movement, such as Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, etc., and how they blame only religion for the world's conflicts. That's a complete misrepresentation of what their arguments actually are. The majority of their arguments is that they're attacking a facet of human nature, which is dogmatism. And many of them would agree. They would both agree that you can have wars out of political ideology, religious ideology. But they agree that religious ideology and political ideology are forms of dogmatism which create conflict. And secondly, a lot of religious people and religious arguments in favour of not putting blame on religion. They talk about not taking things literally. But it seems that when it comes to the good parts of religion, they're happy to take those parts literally. But when they see ugly facets like stoning gay people and chucking off infidels off roofs in the case of the Quran, they seem to make mental gymnastics and not take those literally. You need to be consistent and either take both literally or neither. That's my question.
Okay, so I'm going to ask each of the panel to make a very short remark based on everything that's been said so far, and then we'll see if we have time for one or two more comments, but we're going to have to wrap up quite soon. Rabbi Fahy.
I have to say, this has been amazing. So first of all, just the points, I don't know what your name is, the non-gray sweatshirt. Sammy, over there, and who's the person over there with all the other scriptures? Yeah, I mean, it's amazing points, and I wish we had a little bit more time to cover it. Just as an example, there have been over 30,000 documented religions in the history of the world. So to think about that is incredible, to try and imagine what it would mean to learn each and every one of them. But the question I would ask as well to Mr. Red Kippah over there, who also said something brilliant, which is you can't just look at Judaism on this, you have to look at all religion on balance. And the question I'd ask on that, and as well to you, Sam, is that really we have to ask what the alternative is. Because it's very easy to point out deficiencies in any specific thing. Like Winston Churchill used to say about democracy, it's the worst form of government besides for every other form that's ever been tried by humanity since the beginning of time. So we all know certain flaws that exist within certain natures, but you have to ask what the alternative would be. And if the problem with religion is being dogmatic, you can be dogmatic about political party affiliation. You could be dogmatic about nationalism without any relationship to religion whatsoever. So the concept of asking why you need a book for this, which is what your question was as well, is really hinged on one question. Bottom line, when human beings can make up whatever they want and there's no specific overriding authority, what are you supposed to do when all different sorts of people feel all different sorts of ways about all different sorts of things? That's where the conversation begins. And again, I wish we had more time to be able to cover it, but I thought the comments that were made were very, very intelligent. Thank you very much.
Okay, Simon.
Rabbi Fahy's hit it. I think there's a number of comments about why do you need a book, and I think he's right. Before religion, if you look at it before history records the Torah or some form of law having been given, human society was based on fighting people for food, for power, within for relationships, etc., etc. I think that the creation of a moral code has helped to sort of civilize humanity, and I think that now as we learn and interpret through all of this, I think it really does help. And I really agree with what Laura said. The reason that I have Jewish values and try and live those Jewish values is not necessarily because I read it in a book or learnt it at Cheder, but because my parents taught it to me, because we experienced that at home, because I live amongst a community where those are the values that are shared. And so I think that my religion to me is both firmly religious, but also cultural and social, and really helps to drive the values that are important to me.
Laura Marks.
So I want to pick up the point that somebody asked about, I think somebody over here asked about other faith groups. And I want to end on something positive, because for me, religion is more positive than negative. I can see the negatives, but I believe in the positives. And I was looking at some quotes from people who have the same perspective, and there's what's often called the golden rule. So we believe that it's Jewish, right? We start off with Hillel supposedly saying, that which is hateful unto you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole of Torah. Okay, so, and we believe in that as a sort of basis for most of Judaism. But Christians believe that it's absolutely the basis of Christianity too. So in Luke it says, Jesus said, do to others as you would have them do unto you. And just to sort of complete the trio, the Prophet Muhammad said, you will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love each other. Shall I show you something that if you did, you would love each other? Spread peace between yourselves. So I wanted to end on that very positive note, which shows the three main Abrahamic religions. Not only do we basically think the same, but if you ask anybody or most people within those communities what they think is the basis for their religion, they will tell you the same thing, and it's very positive.
Joe Greenaway, is religion bringing more evil or good to the world?
I just wanted to reflect on a really important point that I think was raised by this lady over here about the problem of bad examples being set by bad leaders across all religions. And I think a lot of people do lose faith because they look at particular religious leaders and they see this kind of abuse of power. But to me, today we live in this kind of post-authoritarian society where actually it's not about the leaders anymore, it's about us. And I would encourage everybody to think about religion as our own inheritance. Like each of us is Jewish, each of us should and can have access to our religion and our texts and to find our own access points, to find the things that we relate to and that enable us to be better.
Okay, and briefly, the last word, Eddie Aronson, but I said briefly.
I'll try and be brief. Just again, going back to the last questioner, I think that there is a narrative being pushed that, if we just got rid of religion, the world would just be a far better place. I just think, as I mentioned before, I think that's just incorrect.
A little bit louder.
I think that's just incorrect, and based on the facts I mentioned. But I also think it's important to be mindful of history. Just recently, you have, Stalinist Russia, you have Pol Pot in Cambodia, millions dying at the hands of these secular regimes. So we can just see that it's not necessarily something just to do intrinsically with religion, but it's something about human beings. So we mustn't make that mistake, because I don't think it does justice to the issue.
Well, guys, it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for engaging with us, for your... I'm honestly so grateful. We're all grateful that you all engaged intellectually. Who's going to be the last one to clap?